Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our 9th Supplier Engagement Series webinar. I'm Stacy Francis. I'm the Small Business Program Manager here at the Idaho National Laboratory, and I'm your host for today's webinar. We have a great presentation today, and next month on March 10th, I'm very excited to introduce our new Laboratory Director, John Wagner, to you. John will be joined by Deputy Lab Directors Marianne Wallach and Juan Alvarez. You won't want to miss this one, so you can register at procurement.inl.gov, and that registration is open now. Before I introduce our speaker for today, I want to remind you that if you have any questions during the presentation, please add it to the questions tab, and we will be addressing those questions as we go through the webinar if I can answer them, and if not, Elise will address those at the end of the webinar. We will also be posting the presentation and a recording of the webinar this afternoon on the procurement.inl.gov website, so check back there if you want to take another look at it. We are excited to have so many people in attendance with us today as we demystify service contracts at the Idaho National Laboratory, and Elise Miller is just the person to do that for us. It's my pleasure to introduce Elise to you today. Elise is our Service Acquisition Manager, and Elise has been at the lab for about 10 years, and she cut her teeth in the service contract world. Elise oversaw some of our largest subcontracts during her tenure as a contract specialist and learned all things about nuclear fuel fabrication, nuclear non-proliferation, university research contracts, as well as many others. Elise is a proud Badger, having graduated from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And so with that, Elise, I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Stacy. I'm excited to be here talking to you about service subcontracts. The goal here is demystifying service subcontracts, so helping you to understand all the different scope of service subcontracts that we do here at the lab, and trying to address it a little bit from a vendor's perspective. So what opportunities there are, how you can take advantage of those opportunities, and a little understanding of our process and what we're doing. So that'll get started. So what are service subcontracts? We really cover any subcontract that is not for materials. And I gave a list here of some examples, but it's pretty comprehensive what we do. And so this list is by no means covering everything that we cover. I try to hit some of the big items. Construction is considered a service subcontract. Anything engineering related, engineered items, fabricated items, actual engineering services like civil engineering, nuclear engineering, electrical engineering, fire safety protection services, things like that. Staff augmentation, so anything from IM through administrative services, and anything in between, honestly. Anywhere you might see a staff augmentation service. Professional services is probably one of our broadest categories. Anything from consulting to information management, project management, those providing their expertise, whether that be on the nuclear engineering side, the energy and environmental side, but soliciting experts in the fields around the country and around the world. Research contracts, anything to help support the research ongoing at the lab. We also cover licensing and software. So product and implementation of both of those. So we purchase software, which in some ways is a material, but we do cover software under services, and then associated implementations with large software projects. All the university research and related contracts for those are covered under service subcontracts. Infrastructure support, so you're talking your snow removal, maintaining the lawns and landscaping, cafeteria services, janitorial services, maintenance services, anything in the training world, whether that be, in fact, I'm working on my sexual harassment training this morning, so that sort of a training to specific training for machines and equipment, and everything in between, any training we provide through subcontract. Subscriptions, services, leases. These are just some examples. We have some more examples later I'll talk about, but service subcontracts is a really broad category. It's a lot of different things. So basically, if it's not a material and we're going out to get something, it falls in our groups. Just to give you a sense, just a little bit of how much we do, the service volume through the lab is huge. This just shows the past decade, and you can see there's been steady growth. It was a bit of a dip around when the market crashed, several years ago. But steady incline in services that we're soliciting, millions and millions of dollars that we go out and get subcontract services for. This just shows a graphic of all the different NAICS codes that we get services through subcontract for. I know it's really small, but I'll kind of go through a few of them. The first category is all other professional, scientific, and technical. So that's sort of our catch-all NAICS code. We have a lot of services that don't fall in a specific category. So a lot of them just get put in that all other professional, scientific, and technical. And when I go over some of the more specific services later, I can get a little into what that might include. But you'll see that's our largest category. In this one, it's 230 million there. The next, educational support services. So anything relating to education and research, university contracts. After that, then is construction. We have a very large volume of construction contracts, followed by engineering services, whether that be providing engineering support for facilities or engineering related to research engineering. Lessons in non-residential buildings, research and development in engineering. Let's see if I can find another. There's a bunch of computer about midway down for 60 million. In two different categories, you have custom computer programming and other computer related services. So a lot of information management and program development for the programs specific to research. There's real estate, computer facilities, telecommunications, and we have administrative on there, analytical laboratory, manufacturing, remediation services. It again, just gives a sense of the broad scope of service subcontracts that we do, and also the large volume that the lab is doing in service subcontracts. So to better provide a sense of what we do, this is just an example of some of the service subcontracts we do. I tried to pick a broad range of types of service subcontracts, while also, trying to get more specific, not just high level, some of the specific, but also broad range things that we do. Again, these are just examples. Our group, the group that I specifically oversee in service acquisitions, has 26 contract specialists that are managing several hundred contracts. So this is just, a tip of the iceberg for the types of service subcontracts we do, but hopefully it'll provide at least some scope of what kinds of services we might be looking for. I'll just run through some of them. So education and training, like I said before, we do a lot of training through our service subcontracts, and that is broad ranged as well. We have public speaking training, specific content training for, technical services, computer training. It can cover any of that. And then related education programs as well. We do resource efficiency programs. Those are energy and environmental. So, addressing resource efficiency, 3D printing and modeling. So anything related to those. Mobile power station, strategic advisory and review committees. These are across the lab and cover various programs. So you may see, for example, a review committee on geotechnical services, or a review committee on nuclear, or something related to ANS. It depends. They're all over. That's an example of some of the services we have. Programmatic strategy support, so developing and building strategy, video services, computer programming. A unique one that we have is relations support with Native communities. I mentioned staff aug support earlier. We have another slide on staff aug support, so I'll talk about that in a little bit. Same with engineered items, fabrication, construction. Those are really large categories that we frequently use. Infrastructure support. So I talked earlier about all those different types of infrastructure support to help our laboratory run. Engineering, we're an engineering laboratory, so anything from nuclear engineering and on the research side to support engineering like drafting, civil engineering, those types of engineering, mechanical. A lot of the subcontracts we use are in expert consultation, specific to projects. For example, for the VTR, we will solicit those that have experience across the nation in VTR related technologies. And so engaging them to help us with our research. That's just an example. Same in the energy and environment world as well. We solicit tech support, software installation, licensing, lots of things related to our information management department, support related to that. Maintenance, maintenance from, well, I've already talked about infrastructure support maintenance, but additionally maintenance for a lot of the high-tech equipment and machinery we have at the laboratory, fleet maintenance, so a broad range of maintenance categories there. We solicit foreign travel support, so back when we were allowed to travel, helping us travel internationally, getting visas, things like that. Hazardous transportation and route surveys. We do a lot of moving of hazardous materials, and so planning route surveys and planning those transportations. Same with the casks related to maybe those movements, all fall in service subcontracts. Sample analysis, sending samples off to different laboratories around the country. Drilling, seismic, geotechnical analyses, anything in those arenas as well. We've done executive coaching, equipment rental, specific facility support. So I mentioned maintenance before, same kind of thing. We have specific support for those facilities that's necessary. And so obtaining that specific support. And then another huge broad ranging category is university support. We're constantly doing research and engaging the university community under service subcontract. So how do we do service subcontracts? This just runs through our process. It's very high level. We may or may not do the first step. It talks about doing an expression of interest on what was formerly known as FedBizOps. We don't do that all the time. Expressions of interest are generally used if we are unsure of the capabilities out in the vendor community, or unsure of specifically how we're going to pursue a project. A lot are often done on larger contracts to get a better sense of the market and better understand who the players are and what potential avenues we may want to pursue in our subcontract. So that's not always done, but it is a potential step, so there's a place to look there. Internally, what happens is the technical or program identify a need for a subcontract. They realize they have something that they need done that they cannot do themselves for whatever reason. And you saw we have a broad range of types of contracts, so it really varies on to why they may be pursuing that. Maybe it's a niche expertise that they're looking for. It could be that, like in Staff Aug, that we're overwhelmed with something and we need to support additional services. So it depends, on where the request is coming from in terms of why we are getting those requests. But those requests are generated through the technical and program personnel that identify this need, and then they submit those to us. They're submitted and approved. Those requests that we get may or may not identify a vendor with them. I mentioned in the next bullet point down, there's a lot of things that may be applicable in terms of if they're identifying a vendor. We have, for example, the simplified acquisition threshold award to small businesses. So anytime if they have identified a small business for services, they can do so without a competition. There's other small business thresholds as well, your hub zone, your 8A, all those. Stacy can speak to those more if you have questions on those. We have others with specific DOE agreements, or they may have a non-competitive justification, which indicates that there's only one vendor capable of doing a service. So they may come to us with a vendor identified. If they do, like I said, if they determine it's non-competitive, there's a process by which they justify that they've done market research and no one else can perform that service. They may come with several vendors. They may say, we're pursuing an engineering service. These are 5 vendors we're aware of, and then we have those as a pool to solicit from. Or they may not know who they want to go to. They may not be aware of who can do that. So we get all of that range from, I know exactly who needs to do this, to I have no idea. And if they don't know, then that comes to us. And I have another slide on that. How do we select our vendors? But then if that comes to our shop where they don't know, we work on market research and with our small business program manager, Stacy, to identify who may be able to provide those services. After we identify the vendor or vendors, we would send out an RFP, a request for proposal, to get a proposal on the services that we are soliciting specific to a scope of work that we would send out. Those are then evaluated. Either there's a lot of bases on which we evaluate those, whether that be low cost, technically acceptable, we may do a best value. There's a lot of methods for evaluating those proposals. And then when we negotiate the contracts, it's awarded and managed by Service Acquisitions, so the folks in my group. And then when it's completed, we do a final vendor evaluation. Stacy can speak a little more to that as well, but there's a default. So most contracts fall into the default that it's an acceptable, everyone did great, but there is an evaluation following the contract. So how do we select a vendor? Like I said before, we do sometimes utilize expressions of interest to identify those interested vendors. It is less common. It tends to be for larger projects, especially those with very unique capabilities that we're looking for, to identify who are the players in that. So sometimes we'll identify vendors through that method. We may do requests for information. Those are not solicited through the beta.sam.gov or FedBizOps. Those are directly through our department and through with our technical programs to find out who the interested vendors are. It's basically a direct to vendor market research program, a way of our obtaining who's capable, what are your capabilities, will they work for us, to determine who our vendor pool may be for a specific acquisition. We do market research, and that can be performed both by the program and or by us. It just varies and depends. We do rely on our technical to support with that market research, given the broad range of what we cover, and our expertise is in contracts, right? Not in their technical specific area. And so we do rely on them to help us determine, the qualifications, at least, of those that we're researching, but we may be helping them identify some potential vendors. Bid lists are approved through our small business program manager. So she also helps in the selection of vendors. That's Stacy Francis. And then we do have a non-competitive basis. It's not ideal. We try to maximize competition, but there are arenas where that happens. I mentioned here, it's especially supported for niche areas. Research, for example, university contracts are done on a non-competitive basis. The way that I think about the way that it functions, a researcher is developing a relationship with a university researcher, and together they determine, hey, this is a research project we could do. So we can't solicit that. They're both very unique in their expertise, and so the nature of it does not lend to competition. And that's very specific. Most of our other services, don't have those same unique components to them, right? If we're looking for a civil engineer, unless we can identify there's a very particular reason it has to be one person, there's a lot of civil engineers that we could solicit for that. So we try to focus on competition when we can. There are unique circumstances where that may not be able to happen. We also have the simplified acquisition threshold, which it's considered competitive. So we can solicit a small business vendor for smaller contracts, then we do not have to go through the same selection process. So we may do that. But again, we get optimization through competition. So it's our goal to pursue competition when possible. And I already mentioned this, but we do focus on small business. We have a lot of latitude through DOE to award to small businesses. We also, it's part of our metrics and goals to award to small businesses. So it's definitely a big goal of ours to try and focus on that small business support. So we do encourage large businesses to partner with small businesses if they're looking to do work at the lab. It's definitely an avenue that's more open. So just to follow up on that, how are we selecting vendors? So based on that, how can a vendor start to work for INL? It can seem a little intimidating and nebulous and broad ranging. And so how do you as a vendor start to develop that relationship and get to work for INL? There isn't a magic ticket to doing so. Unfortunately, I can't tell you, oh, just do this and you'll be in. But some ideas, it really comes down to networking, to getting your product business, right, the services you provide known. And it's not just to one individual or one group. So the first, acquisitions, let's say that you're a fab shop, getting to know the specific contracts folks in my department that do fabrications will help. Then they're aware that you're a business that is available should we have that need arise. I think I do have people reach out to me and that's great and that's fine, but trying to be more specific about your scope, what your business does helps. Because like I said, I don't work fab contracts, but I know who does. And so I can provide that to them and then they can know, here are some vendors that if we need a pool of vendors, I can solicit. And then also Stacy in our small business program, building that relationship so she's aware of the services you provide. Then if our folks come to her and say, hey, I'm looking for this business, this type of work, she's aware of what's available as well. You can also network through those small business fairs and opportunities. I don't think we're having those as much right now, but it's a great way to find out what work is being done and also make sure that we're aware of what you provide. But also I think networking through the technicals and the programs is really important. Like I said, a lot of our requests come directly from our technicals to go to particular businesses, whether they identify one or several. They're aware of who out in the community can provide those services. So making your services known to the technical community is really important, whether that's through conferences, fairs, other events, networking with the technicals directly on other, if you're doing other projects with them, other things, especially in the unique expertise areas, identifying yourself as a potential option to them. And then with other vendors, I think it's important to network with other vendors. If you're a large business and you're looking at getting into something like engineering, it's great to partner with a small business because then you have the ability to provide that small business more tools and resources. But it's also an easier avenue for us for contracting through small business. So networking with businesses that are already working for INL or that may be able to complement your business, I think is another great way to look at starting to work for the INL. Okay, so I wanted to talk about just a few types of subcontracted work. So first the types, and then I'll focus on a couple of those types. We have 3 types of subcontracted service work. The first is staff augmentation, fairly limited use. This is specific to supplement work that BEA or INL is doing. So if we have staff that do that type of work, then it's staff augmentation work. We do this across the lab. It's not extensive. I mean, it's not the largest portion of our subcontract work, but it is very broad ranging. Anything from administrative work, we use them in communications, information management, in engineering, from like engineering crafts all the way to engineering research. So we use them everywhere, all through the lab. But again, it is kind of a limited use. We have pretty strict policies on our staff augmentation, and I'll get to that in a minute. We also have what's called managed services, where we subcontract an entire function out. So for example, our cafeteria services are subcontracted. Those run usually for several years, so but they are competed. So if you're interested in those types of services, it's great to reach out to find out, when those may be rebid. Cafeteria, janitorial, our IT support, like our help desk, if you will, for IT. So all those types of services we consider managed services. And then the big chunk, which is really most of our contracts, is the task-based subcontracts. And those are the examples I provided earlier. It is the majority of what we do. The tasks are defined, right? So whether that be a specific research project that when it's complete, it's done. Maybe it's sample analysis, analyze these 10 samples, repair this particular machine, I don't know, participate on a review committee, but they're discrete, right? The description of the scope of work is very discrete. Here's the job, you complete it, and then we pay you, or we may pay you ongoing. But most of our contracts fall into that area. It's vendor directed, specific scope, and that's probably, I don't know, 80% or more of the service subcontracts that we do. So I wanted to talk about 3 specific types of those services, those task-based services. I think that these are 3 common ones that we get questions about, so I wanted to address them specifically. They're not, I said we have this huge range of contracts that we do in different types of scopes and activities, but there's 3 that kind of always stand out. So I wanted to just touch on those briefly. And the first, engineering services. So, and I didn't list it here, but what I'm specifically talking about is drafting, civil, and mechanical. But we also have engineering related to engineering researchers. So the more specific, like nuclear engineering and a little higher specificity to the research occurring. We usually compete these through RFPs, especially the drafting, civil mechanical type services. They're small business focused. There's lots of partnering opportunities here. We also have engineered items and fabricated items. Specific to this is having those quality levels. So we have 4 quality levels at the INL, and the engineered items and fabricated items generally have some scope within quality. So I just listed here for information. So for example, we have nuclear grade QL1. In order to even really, you don't have to be on our QSL, which is qualified supplier list, to get solicited for QL1 work. But you have to demonstrate that you have an NQA1 program that could qualify for our qualified supplier list. So if you're interested in that kind of work, ensuring that you have those programs that you could compete for those. We also have commercial grade dedication. We don't generally use this one for engineered items. We do QL3. We tend to have a stable of vendors that we solicit that have prior INL experience. So if you're interested in that kind of work, it's not unavailable, but that's really developing those relationships with the contract specialists, so they're aware of other shops that may be able to provide that type of service. And then QL4, so there's no QA, that's non-quality, and we're much more open on that based on what our needs are, but we're more open on competition if it's non-quality. There's a note here just that the higher the quality grade, the more particular we are in terms of who we're soliciting, in terms of known versus unknown vendors, just because there's very little tolerance for error with quality. So another specific service is construction. I'm not going to talk about construction a lot. I know there was a webinar on construction last month. So I think if you're interested in construction, I would recommend that you review that. Or we reach out to Stacy, we can help connect you with the right people to talk about construction. It's very specific area within services. I just wanted to mention it is subject to site stabilization agreement, which is a construction site labor agreement. If you want more information, there's a website provided here that you can take a look at. And then work in Idaho Falls and at the INL site is subject to the Davis-Bacon Act. So that's wages and fringe benefits requirements. So if you're interested in that information, please take a look at those. Reach out to us if you have more questions on construction. We have others that can provide you a little more detail on working in construction at INL. And then the third specific service I wanted to talk about was staff augmentation. We did talk about staff augmentation a little bit before. Again, it's used across the lab for a variety of services where we have a need that we need to fill that typically would be filled by an INL employee that for whatever reason we cannot fill that by an employment option. I talked about it before. We use it for an array of services. You know, it's really anything that we might do at the lab, we may use for staff augmentation. We are redoing our staff augmentation policies, procedures, just everything in general. So staff augmentation is a little bit up in the air with INL right now. We already have several vendors that we utilize. And so if staff augmentation is your specialty, I mean, it's not that we couldn't utilize additional services, but we're in the process of redoing some of our processes and looking into how we're doing that. And part of that will be creating a sort of a certified vendor pool. So we only are soliciting specific vendors that we know can meet those things that we have identified in our policies, procedures. So that's developing, it's underway. I don't have a lot of great answers for that right now. You know, but we can make note if that's something that you're interested in. We're trying to reduce our emphasis on staff augmentation. There's a lot of risk to the lab if staff augmentation is not managed appropriately. You know, staff augmentation employees are basically INL employees in the eyes of the Department of Labor and IRS. And so we're trying to better address how we handle those relationships. But I'm happy to discuss that more with someone if you have questions on staff augmentation. So how do you get started with INL? Stacey can go into a little more detail on this, but I'll just run through it briefly. If you're interested in working with INL, there's a few steps you can go ahead and take right away, even before you know, I talked about the networking and getting yourself known and trying to work with technicals and contract specialists and Stacey and small business. And before even doing all that, getting your Dun & Bradstreet, getting an employer identification number through the IRS, and then registering through SAM, which is a system for awards management. I don't know that it's required for everyone, but for small business, it is required. And then we have our own vendor portal, the INL vendor portal at vendor.inl.gov. Recommend that you register with that. That gets you into our sort of vendor pool. So we're aware of that you're there and that you're interested. And then forward your information to Stacey in the small business office, so she can also help provide additional information, see what's available, and help connect you to the right people. So I'd encourage you to do that if that's something you're interested in. We have a lot going on. Like I said, there's just work all across the lab and there's a lot of it. So it's exciting stuff, a lot of availability, a lot of options. Hopefully this has kind of helped clarify what we do and what we're looking at and how we do it. I know it's probably still a bit of a confusing process, but I hope that helps somewhat. So I'll turn it back to Stacey for questions.
Thanks, Elise. Well, you've been presenting, I've been frantically answering questions. So probably the key takeaway that I'm getting from the questions that are being asked is, what's that first point of contact? And that's me. As the Small Business Program Manager, I'm your first point of contact for doing work with the Idaho National Laboratory. So you can shoot me an email at small.business@inl.gov, or like I put in the comment section, you can also use my direct email, stacy.francis@inl.gov. When you send me an email though, what I need you to do is send me your capability statement. And then I need you to tell me in your email where you see your company fitting in with INL. You're better off determining where you think you fit than me trying to figure out where you fit. So I need you to help me a little bit when you send me that information so that I know who to direct you to. Elise, I've got a couple questions that I didn't answer. I saved them for you.
Okay.
So the first one is talking about networking and getting known. Are your technical/engineering program offices open to meeting with vendors? And I have an answer on that one too, if you.
Well, you probably both should answer. I'm interested in your perspective too. I would say it depends. I think some would be. I think it depends a lot on what you're offering. And like I said, we have such a broad range, so it's hard to give a blanket answer to that. I think I don't want to say no, they're not. I think they are, but I think especially as you get, the more technical you are, they're going to want to do that meeting networking more in like a conference setting. Like that's, you know, where you'll find out that, hey, we've got connections, we're utilizing the same, or we're asking the same questions, we're trying to accomplish the same research goals or whatever. If you're looking at something more like maintenance, specifically like groundskeeping or something, I don't really think that that's probably more with you and with us as contract specialists to help identify those vendors first, and then we may take those back to the technical. So I think it really depends on your scope. I don't know if you have a better clarification for that.
Nope. You answered it exactly as I was going to. What I do is the first, as the point of contact, the initial point of contact within the lab, is I take a look at that capability statement and where you think that you fit with INL missions, because you're the one that knows your business, you're the one that knows where you want to grow, expand, where your expertise is. I use that information that you send to me, and then I send it out to the program and the technical representatives. Now you have to realize these folks are very busy doing mission work, right? They're focused on accomplishing the missions of the laboratory. What happens then is I wait to hear back from them to see if they have an interest. A lot of times there may not be an opportunity on the table, and so they store that away for future in case an opportunity does come up. I also will send it to the contract specialist. And at least this kind of goes into the next question, so I'll prep you for that one in just a minute. So that the next time the contract specialist has a solicitation coming up, say for groundskeeping or something, they've started to collect a tickler file of businesses who have expressed interest in that at the lab. And so they can go to that resource as well. Our contract specialists also use our vendor portal to do market research to identify companies. So if you have completed the registration form in the vendor portal and you have not put a business description in, we will not find you, because we use those keywords to trigger our search. And so if you do engineering, you need to make sure that that's in that business description. It's an unlimited field. I don't need your whole line card dropped in there in text, but please put those keywords in there for what you do. We do search a little bit on NAICS codes as well. So you can have up to 3 NAICS codes in there. So make sure those are listed. So Elise, the question is, of the 26 staff people, do they focus on specific service areas? If yes, how can we, as possible vendors, get to know which people handle our service line?
Yeah, and actually, there's 2 groups that do service subcontracts. The other group that focuses on infrastructure and construction. So there's actually even more than 26 individuals, depending on what area your work is in. I would recommend, again, first line is Stacy. I think send it to Stacy. She often knows which contract specialist that needs to go to, and if she does not, she'll reach out to me or to the other manager, and we'll help identify who that needs to go to. It's not, we don't have like a published list of, you know, if you're fabrication, it's here, if you're engineered items, it's here, if it's, you know, groundskeeping, it's here, because it's fluid, it's changing a lot. And and we may have more than one person that supports that. And so I think just getting that information to Stacy first, and Stacy, and maybe you disagree, but I think you engage us as you need it to help direct those to the right people.
Yeah, you know, and my job is as a connector, right? I'm the connection for your contacting INL and getting your information into the right hands internally. And I think it's important to note that just because I get a capability statement from you does not mean that I have an opportunity to send to you. We do a lot of different procurements, but there's not necessarily a specific one that you qualify for today when you send that to me. And the reality of it is that from the initial point of contact with, and I believe it's with any national lab, from the initial point of contact to getting that first opportunity bid is somewhere between 18 and 24 months. It takes a long time for the right opportunity to come up. It takes a long time for, we tend to go to, I'll just be honest with you, we tend to go with the vendors that we know that are already performing. It's just like in your personal life, right? If you've got something that's working for you, there's no incentive to try something new. But yet we do have an obligation to look at new contractors, and we do. And the contract specialist, I push them to look to put at least one new vendor on a bid list each time they go out, so that we really are truly trying to expand our base of subcontractors. We're going to have to, if we get as much work in as we are forecasting, we have to expand our vendor base. So there is opportunity, but it's not going to help. It's not going to happen next week. So you need to be patient. You need to be persistent, but don't be a pain. Because I get a lot of emails, and I've put my email out there like 400 times today, and I'm just dreading what my inbox is going to look like. So give me a little bit of time to respond back to you. But
Stacey,
go ahead.
Can I add a little to that?
Sure.
You know, two things I want to add to that. The first is, when I mentioned networking, I talked about networking with vendors that are already established. You know, for instance, if you provide engineering, we have an engineering services contract in place. If you can network with the vendor that's already working under that contract, maybe they can subcontract to you. I mean, it's a way to start getting in, that getting us to know, oh, there's this other vendor out there that can do this work. So that's why I mentioned, like you said, we do tend to go with who we know. So it's not a bad plan to try and work with vendors that are already established. It's a great way to get, noticed, if you will. And then also, you mentioned that it takes some time. And I just, to reiterate, same contract, we have this engineering services contract. When we issue that, we compete it. We go out to several vendors, but when we award it, it's a multi-year contract. And so a lot of these large competed contracts, you have, like you said, the opportunities may not be there because we may have just awarded that contract for several years, and we won't be recompeting it for a while. So that's just a reality of the process.
Yep, exactly. Okay, I'm going to start running through a bunch of these questions. I'm getting a lot of questions about our forecast and opportunities portal. People, I know you hear this from me every month, and I feel like a broken record, but I really am trying to get more opportunities posted so that you have an opportunity to know what we have coming up and if it fits in your area. Sorry, the sun's blinding me through the blind there. I'm really working on it. We actually have an initiative underway that we're just trying to kick off within the small business program to kind of do a transformation of our program. And it's going to be increasing our acquisition planning, doing a better job of identifying opportunities, establishing some inter-protege agreements, which we don't have any in place right now, working with the tribe, the Native American population. There's a whole bunch of this in the questions section that you'll see I've been answering. We really are trying to change the focus of our small business program. So please be patient with me, because as a federal government contractor, it does not move fast. And it takes buy-in from the top all the way down to the orgs that are executing the work. So I'm working in your best interest. I really, truly am. It's just that this ship is so big that it does not turn on a dime. but I'm working on that. So there are opportunities listed at vendor.inl.gov. I can't say that there's any listed because there's not. If I have any, that's where they will be posted, okay? And I know some people are saying they check every week. You know, folks, check once a month, check once a year right now. I mean, it's one of the biggest frustrations in my job because I'm just not able to get those opportunities posted for you. But know that I'm trying really, really hard to do that. Elise, there's been some questions about using GSA vehicles. Do you want to address that?
Yeah, it's an option, especially pricing. GSA pricing, we're pretty open to utilizing. In terms of terms, it is not our preference. We're going to try to negotiate our terms. So if you're trying to, if you're a new vendor and you don't have a demand, we're going to go to the vendor that's willing to negotiate our terms over GSA terms. However, we do negotiate with GSA terms if necessary. It's just not ideal for us. Now, like I said, pricing, yes, we will, utilize GSA pricing. So hopefully that answers that.
We will use GSA pricing, but we don't necessarily use the GSA vehicle. So we don't use like the Oasis, or we don't use the MSAs. You'll find that as an M&O contractor for us, we like to control our destiny. And there's been some questions about using some sources that are available for building solicitation lists. We build those all in-house through conversations with the technical point of contact, contract specialist, and myself. A little bit of how the process works, because I know that this has been asked in there a couple times. We generate those solicitation lists in-house, and the solicitation package only goes out to those companies that made the solicitation list. So we do not post them in the open market anywhere. You will only get it if the solicitation package, if you've made that solicitation list. The follow-on to that is I've been asked if I can identify who some of the contract holders are for some of these blanket agreements. Again, as an M&O contractor, I cannot. We don't share that information. So what we have found, and it's a little harder in this environment where we're all working from home and we're working remotely, but when you go to conferences, that networking that Elise talked about is so very, very, very important. Because I can guarantee you when we send a solicitation package out, probably within a day, everybody in the market or within that area knows who was on that solicitation list. And part of that is because they're looking for partnering opportunities, right? So say company A made the solicitation list, but they need some partners to help fulfill the requirements of the RFP. So that's where that partnering is so important. So that addresses the question of active vendors or contracts available. We do not post out there the duration of the contracts. We do not post any information about post awards. Let me see. There's a lot of questions along that vein, so I think that that's kind of answered some of them. It's not that we're secretive, and I kind of get the feeling that that's maybe what people are taking away from this. Again, as part of the small business transformation, we're really going to try and be more transparent in what we do and how we do it. So I'm working towards that. That we will hopefully be able to be more transparent about upcoming opportunities, and some of the way we do business, I guess, is very much unique to an M&O contractor, that managing and operations contractor, than it is with the federal government. We only have to flow down the FAR contracts that are in our prime contract with the Department of Energy. And so, for instance, a good example of that is we do not have the limitations and subcontracting clause. It's not called out in our contract, and so we do not flow that down into our subcontracts. So as an M&O, we have a lot more latitude in the interpretation of the FARs because we only have to do what's in our contract. So I hope that helps with answering that question. There's a question here on SBIR opportunities. I don't manage those out of the small business office. But again, Keith, if you want to send me an email, I can put you in touch with the organization within the lab that does manage the SBIRs. Let me scan back through here. Carol, yes. So if you were to receive a contract from BEA, that would be a contract with BEA, not the Department of Energy. So you would be contracting directly with Battelle Energy Alliance, who is the M&O contractor for the Idaho National Laboratory, not with the Department of Energy. And that's where that uniqueness comes in.
I think that's a common misperception, and it gets into, again, we're not being secretive, but we may not be a private business, and so we are held to some requirements, but we are also not government, and so we're not held to the same standards as government either. It's a very unique space, being an M&O contractor. So like I said, it's not an intention of secretism, it's just we have different requirements that we're held to. And so.
Keith Trail has some questions on here about some specific COVID mitigations. Keith, if you want to reach out to me and we can talk about this, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking for, but I can certainly try and help get you an answer. Let's see, Elise, here's a comment from Stephanie Sherwood. She said that she's also a small business liaison officer, so she has the same job as I do. And she said that she often refers to her job as a cat herder, which is exactly how we feel sometimes, right? I feel like I'm herding cats, and we all know how that goes some days. But her comment to you was, please let the CBs know that you have large businesses working under subcontracted BEA, and each of them has small business contracting commitments. So that's that small business subcontracting plan that a large business has to provide to us if the award's over $700,000. And so they are looking to do specific spend with small business underneath those really large contracts too. So there's opportunities to partner on those large scopes of work as a small business provider underneath that areas. And I know that the universities also submit small business subcontracting plans. So there's opportunities there as well.
It gets back to the networking with other vendors is really a fantastic way to do work, because there is a lot of work that is, sub-tier subcontracted through our vendors that we already subcontract with, whether that be large or small.
Right. Okay. Let me scan through some of the ones that have come. For Dawn Eggett, yeah, I am your point of contact. Touch base with me first, and then I will try and connect you internally. Alan Elliott, does BEA value MBE, SBE, and DBE certifications? We have socioeconomic goals that we negotiate with the Department of Energy every year, but they're in the 6 main categories. They're small disadvantaged business, women-owned, service disabled, hub zone, and we have a specific Idaho goal that's unique to our contract. So we have to do 30% of our business within the state of Idaho, and that is unique just to our contract. So those other certifications are cherries on top, but they're not ones that we do set asides in, if that makes sense. Mark Shansholzer, on your confirmation email for the vendor portal, again, send me an email and I can help you get that worked out. Here you go, Elise. I'm just going to read this to you. I'm skimming it, and so I'm going to just read it out loud to you. If a solicitation is put out unrestricted, are you still likely looking for a small business lead, or at that point, does it not count to your small business goals?
No, I mean, we always will favor small business. Now, if we have a solicitation where there's small and large on there, then at that point it will be, it's not generally a factor in the evaluation of that. So, if it's a low price, technically acceptable. If we have a mix, it's going to go to the one that wins that. but our goal is to include those small businesses so that
there.
we can try to achieve that goal.
Yeah, we always focus on small business first, but if it does go out as a full and open, it's going to come down to whatever the requirements are in that solicitation. If it's best value, low price, that's what it's going to come down to. I think that's what Elise is saying. Rick Ginther, no, I do not have a list of qualified suppliers on the website. Again, it's one of those things that I can't share, but the market's really good at sharing that. So again, it's about networking. But if you have more questions on that, just give me a call, send me an email. I'm not answering my phone in the office because I'm not there. So for the 30% Idaho businesses, can you provide additional information? For example, does that mean the business has to have an office in Idaho, be headquartered there, or be willing to place an office in Idaho? The way we capture that is based on zip code. So it's where we send the bill. But that means you have to have more than just a PO box sitting somewhere at the Idaho Falls Post Office. It means that you have to have a viable presence within the state that we can look to when we're contracting. So there's satellite offices here. We're always looking for businesses that want to expand to Idaho. If you haven't been to Idaho Falls recently, Idaho Falls is in a boom. There is a lot of work going on here, not just with the National Lab, but with the Naval Reactors Facility. They've got a lot of work going on. Fluor, Idaho has some work going on with the Idaho Cleanup Project. And then the commercial world, and that is just out of control as well. So there's a lot of opportunities in Idaho Falls and the surrounding area right now, just not specifically tied to government contracting. And it's a great place to live, except today when it's 9 degrees outside. Our winters do get a little long. So we are bumping right up on the 10 o'clock hour. And I know there's a lot of questions out there. I think that we've touched on most of them. I think that we've gotten the essence of most of the questions and provided an answer. One more time, I'm going to give you a couple of URLs to check out. So to get registered to do business at the INL, go to vendor.inl.gov. And to see the webinar series, how to get started doing business with the Idaho National Lab, the opportunities, if we get some posted, that's procurement.inl.gov. And those are will link back and forth to each other. So once you get to one, you'll be able to get to the other. And again, my email address is Stacey, S-T-A-C-E-Y, .Francis, F-R-A-N-C-I-S, @inl.gov. And don't panic if you've used the small.business at inl.gov email address as well, because that comes directly to me. I manage both of those inboxes. So I hope we've provided some information that gives you a clearer view of how we do service contracting at the lab. If you found this valuable, please shoot me an email. Again, as I always ask, if you have a specific topic that you'd like us to cover on these webinar series, shoot that to me as well. I believe that after the March webinar with John Wagner and Juan Alvarez and Marianne, we are going to move to a every other month webinar series. So we will go from March to May. And eventually maybe we'll get back into the ability to go out and attend these small business conferences across the country again. I know that that's it's really hard when we're doing it one-on-one now instead of in a large forum where you're able to meet with all the national labs and discuss everything for all those labs in one environment. So hopefully we'll be getting back to that when travel restrictions get lifted. Carol, I saw your note. The March webinar is March 10th. And you can register for that out at procurement.inl.gov. It's the 5th little box over on that one. And with that, again, I want to thank you for attending, and we will be posting the presentation and a video of this out to that webinar page as soon as we get it rendered here internally. So look for that, and everybody have a great day and stay healthy.